Hello, and a very warm welcome to Evolving Consciousness. If you are visiting this channel for the very first time, this channel talks about a host of topics. The topics are mostly focused around spirituality, personal development, and the whole goal of this channel is to share information to make a person evolve his own consciousness and to become a better version of himself. So if you do really enjoy the genre of content which is being shared here, please do like, share and subscribe the content. Coming to the topic of this video. Now this is a particular video which is going to be very close to my heart because I am going to talk about Bhagwad Gita, which needs no introduction. It is the epitome of spiritual literature. It's the epitome of spiritual excellence, which was taught by none other than the Supreme Godhead, Supreme Personality, Lord Krishna himself. Now, Bhagwad Gita is something so powerful and something which is so pragmatic and something which is so deep and practical at the same time, that the more you read it and in different phases of your life, you can realize a new lesson. And the different chapters are so curated that each chapter will bring about an ascension in your consciousness. Now, if you look at the whole plot of Bhagavad Gita, right, where was it told? It was told in the midst of a battleground. Now just think about it. We normal human beings, when we talk about spirituality, most of us have this very immature mindset that spiritual things, the goody things are only limited to the people who are rich, and people who are not so rich are, when things are going good, it's good to hear all this, but when things are not so good, it doesn't really make sense, right? But see the plot in which the Bhagavad Gita was narrated. It was in the midst of a battleground. The highest spiritual wisdom which was ever told in this entire universe was told in the midst of a battlefield. And it was told by Lord Krishna. Of course, nobody can compete with Lord Krishna because he was the ultimate Yogeshwar. A person with absolute equanimity. Nothing could shake his peace out. He always had a smile on his face, no matter what the situation was. And if you look at Sri Krishna's life, right, it's a life filled with tragedies. It wasn't an easy life. He was born in a jail, and from every phase of his life, he had to go through adversities. And even the way his life ended was not something very good, not something very peaceful. But amidst all the chaos, amidst all the difficulties which he had to endure, there was always a blissful smile on his face. A smile which cannot be understood by a materialistic driven society of today. A smile which is beyond the comprehension of the limited human mind. That smile is an essence of his timeless connection with the being, that Atman. Of course, now some people might argue that he was God himself. He was God himself, but he was amongst humans. And he always gave these beautiful examples and beautiful illustrations through his own life, which had such profound wisdom. Now, talking about the Bhagavad Gita, right? Now, this is a particular situation in life where Arjuna is absolutely awestruck by what has happened. He is lamenting. He's completely driven by fear. He's petrified with the fact that he has to go against his own people, the people who we grew with. And Krishna really gives him divine guidance. So this whole idea starts with the second chapter, right, where it's normally told in the Bhagavad Gita as it is by Srila Prabhupada. It says contents of the Gita summarized. I am sure you would have learnt about what is the narrative of that particular setting, but to summarize it, Krishna talks about the fact that we human beings are not just pieces of meat, right? Essentially, we are souls. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And he says that you are being such a fool by lamenting over things which are eventually going to happen. Essentially, he says that the soul cannot be destroyed, it cannot be hurt, it cannot be burnt, it cannot be moistened. So, this concept of you killing someone is a stupid way of looking at reality. Now, this doesn't go to say that we need to indulge in violence. No, that's not the way we need to interpret it. It basically is pointing us towards the power of our identity. Most of us are always confined to the limited identities of this body consciousness. And if you look at the goal of all spiritual schools of thought, the whole central purpose is to move from body consciousness to soul consciousness. And whatever practices, whatever spiritual practices one engages in, the ultimate goal is to realize who we already are. Not to become something which we are not, but to unlearn the conditioning of the material body, to unlearn the sanskaras which we have been acquiring through many lifetimes. Now, lifetimes and past lives are not a philosophical concept anymore. It has been proven, it has been backed by scientific evidence by a lot of researchers. Even in the Western world, we have documented scientific evidence which suggests that past lives do exist. If you really want to understand more over past lives, there's a phenomenal book called Many Lives, Many Masters. The author of the book is a renowned person. He's basically a neuroscientist as well as a past life regression therapist, wherein he has documented real life case histories of people who have been to certain places first in this particular lifetime, but they are able to recollect the exact details of that particular locality, despite being the fact that they are being visiting that particular place for the very first time, right? So this is not a myth or a concept anymore, this is a scientifically proven fact. And the whole purpose of spiritual sciences is to awaken that soul, that dormant soul within each of us, and to view life through the lens of that soul, through the lens of soul consciousness. Now, the interesting part is, when you understand and when you deeply realize that you are a soul, now intellectually this information we can obviously grasp. But when we have that experiential experience that we have become a soul, right? When we realize that, when we have that experience, that is the state of enlightenment. Obviously, having this intellectual knowledge is the first step, but to experience that 24/7, to be in that high state of awareness, where you're absolutely aware of what's happening, that is soul consciousness. And once you realize that you are a soul, you also begin to realize all around you, people are not bodies, they are not identities, but they are souls. Come to think of it, whatever issues, problems, tragedies in our life, they all root down to the identity which we have, right? Now think about it. You might be facing an issue in your job, you might be having a financial crisis ongoing. That financial crisis basically poses a threat to the identity. Now that identity is rooted in body consciousness, right? And that is the reason why fear is developed. When the body consciousness is so predominant in our life, the more we suffer. The more the ego dominates our thoughts. Now, when we talk about the Gita, right, it's absolutely spiritual book which can completely destroy all kinds of ignorance which a person, due to the conditioning of the environment, due to the conditioning of his upbringing, builds upon him. Now, there are certain people who have an extremely immature intellect who say that this Gita needs to be studied post 60 years. It's like saying that you have an examination and you decide to prepare for the examination after the examination. how lunatic can that be? Let's say your examination is on 15th of March, and you say that you will prepare for that examination on 16th of March. Isn't it insane? That's how people understand Bhagwad Gita. They think spirituality is for people who are old. The materialistic driven society will never understand the magnanimity of having spiritual knowledge. For materialistic driven people, the only happiness is sense enjoyments. No, there's nothing, don't get me wrong, that I have nothing against enjoying life. But what appalls to me is that enjoyment is temporary. You can always never keep indulging in your sense enjoyments. And the problem with sense enjoyments and indulgence and overindulgence in sense enjoyments is it becomes addictive. And there can come a point in your life when you're not able to do that for any reason, and it can so happen that since you're not able to do that, you start feeling unhappy because your happiness was dependent on a source from outside, and things in the outside can keep changing. As they say in the outer world, change is the only permanent thing. Today you're here, tomorrow you can be here, again tomorrow you can be here. So if we are going to make our happiness dependent on these sense pleasures, on things which excite us, when our entire focus is built on these aspects, we are missing something deeply blissful. Because spirituality is the highest form of pleasure. Spirituality and the concepts of spirituality don't let a person suffer. Because if you are going to encapsulate, if you are going to umbrella your mindset in the domain of spiritual principles, life becomes so beautiful and nothing will shake you from within. Because the principles, the doctrines in this beautiful, phenomenal book, the Bhagwad Gita as it is so powerful that it can be applied in any dimension of your life. And each time you go through this phenomenal text, you learn something new. And this is not a text that you read for once and you live it. This is a text which needs to be revisited again and again and again until it becomes a part of every cell of your consciousness. And Krishna talks a beautiful, in one of the chapters, Arjuna asks him, sometimes you are always on this crossroads between materialism and spirituality. And he says that, what if I don't meet my success in spirituality? What if I fail in spirituality? Then I would be at the risk of losing both my spiritual success as well as my material desires. Then Krishna gives a beautifully curated answer. He says that anyone who endeavors in the spiritual journey with a deep sense of conviction and sincerity, even though if he may falter, even though if he may get distracted due to his material, due to the very nature of this material world, whatever he has endeavored will not vanish. They will always be in the bank account of his spiritual consciousness. So next time when he takes another body and comes in this material world, he's going to start from the point where he stopped in the previous lifetime. Now this is such a powerful and a beautiful concept to relish. Reason being that most of us are always in the crossroads, the FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. This has become a mental epidemic, a pandemic, which you can say. Because most of us think that if we sacrifice our sensual pleasures for spirituality, we might be missing out on something. And what if we don't succeed in our spiritual endeavors? It's like we might lose materialism as well as spirituality. But Krishna says that you need not think like that. Whatever effort, the smallest of effort to the biggest of spiritual endeavor, it will have a lasting impact in your consciousness. Now come to think of it, this whole paradigm, right? We always keep saying, whenever we come to this world, we come empty-handed, and when we leave the world, we go empty-handed, right? But that exactly is not true. That is true for the material possessions, but that is not true for your characteristics. But the sanskaras which the soul has acquired over many lifetimes. What you take at the moment of your death is the character you have built, is the kind of sanskaras, the qualities, the habits, the characters which the soul has developed within himself. The good, bad, ugly, evil, divine, all varieties, all gamut of characteristics that is carried by the soul in his next lifetime. And based on these sanskaras, a perfect aligned body is created, and that is the whole concept of reincarnation. So whatever we are doing now, it is never going to go waste. This is the indispensable law of the universe. I was reading this phenomenal quote, as a man thinketh, and in that book he talks that good cannot produce evil. But we normally have a limited understanding of what good and evil is. But Krishna says that when you approach life through soul consciousness, through this awareness and alertness of what you're doing and how you're doing, then life becomes absolutely simple. Tragedies become comedies for you, because you smile at life and say that a karmic chapter is coming to a close. This is the depth and power of the Bhagwad Gita. And in the setting, in the onset, he says, stop being napunsak, which in other words means an impotent personality. This lamentation doesn't hold. This lamentation is not a good sign for you, Arjun. You are a warrior. But one thing to note here is, most of us have this warrior mindset, but they are not operating through the consciousness of Arjuna. They are not operating through the consciousness of what Krishna is preaching. Most of us, when we talk about fighting, we fight in the spirit of revenge. But what Krishna is referring to, in that particular context, it was in the pretext of dharma. And he was not fighting them with animosity. He was fighting with a sense of soul consciousness. So I think the Gita is probably, if you look at all the self-help literature which is rampant across the world, if you carefully look at the principles and concepts which have been discussed by these well-known authors, you can find the source of all these messages to the Bhagavad Gita. Let it be law of attraction, let it be law of karma, law of cause and effect, whatever laws which quantum physics, which all spiritual doctrines preach about, all those laws were told by Krishna 5,000 years ago. And the beautiful aspect of this book is, no matter what phase of life you are in, if you just read that, if you just skim through the content of this book, you suddenly feel good. There's a sudden dawn of consciousness. There's a sudden dawn of a feeling of lightness. What essentially has happened is your being has been touched to the words of Lord Krishna. So it is uber important to keep revisiting this concept, this divine literature which our country is gifted with. And this is something which is not confined to any religious group. This is something which is being preached and practiced and spread across the globe. So if you are someone who has never read the Gita, in whatever walk of life you are, this is the ultimate source of solace and bliss. So I'll highly recommend you to start reading the Bhagwad Gita. Thank you. I hope this video inspired you to start reading the Bhagwad Gita, and most importantly, make it a part of your consciousness. Because let's remember, when you are doing it, you are amongst the rare individuals who is at least in the path, who is at least endeavoring to improve his consciousness. So be proud of yourself and engage yourself in this divine wisdom of the Lord himself. Thank you, and meet you in the next video. If you really like this content, please don't forget to share, like, and this genre of content. Do subscribe the channel. Thank you. Bye.